adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 27, 2020, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 27, 2020, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 27, 2020, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and your safety, please be advised that this facility is designed with 2 emergency exits, which are on your right at the front and rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Bozovic? I have not heard from him. Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Chief Kudrick? Here. Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Leggio?
Here.
Mr. Everett?
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Donnell?
Here.
And Chairman Tannenhouse.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Everett, would you like to come up here? Okay, if everybody could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for all of our first responders and our troops abroad. Chief, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, Eileen, do we have any approval of minutes?
We have no minutes.
Vouchers?
We have no vouchers.
Correspondence?
I do have correspondence. I received an email from Mr. Schneider. He says effective immediately, he is resigning from the planning board. It's time to retire after 15 years. So that's why he is not here this evening.
That is a shame, but I
Yes,
guess
we're going to miss him.
I've been on, he's been on as long as I've been on the board. Obviously been here 15 years, so I wish him well. Does anybody want to make any statements? Okay, I spoke to him today as well.
I did too. Okay, and the only other thing I wanted to mention to the board is everybody got their planner a couple weeks ago, but the training session is scheduled for this year for the new members and experienced members. It's going to be April 25th at Marlboro High School. So if everybody could kind of check their calendars and maybe next meeting.
So it's not at the fire?
No, we haven't had it at the Fire Academy in a couple years, and I don't believe you'll be back there at all.
Okay,
So last year was Manalapan, and this year they're at Marlboro. So
Okay.
if you check your calendar next meeting or so, I'll ask you for sure so I can schedule that. And that's
Okay.
all I have.
Is there money in the budget to get the new members copies of the municipal land use law?
That usually comes with the training class. It's all ordered at the same time.
Got it. Okay. Any resolutions?
I have no resolutions,
Submission waivers?
no submission waivers.
Okay, first application before the board is case number SD 2984, Lanes Pond Developers, LLC. It's for an extension of time.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, your professional staff, and members of the public. My name is Peter Klauser. I'm an attorney with the firm Howell Pape, and I have the pleasure of representing Lanes Ponds Developers. This was an application that this board approved in May for a minor subdivision for 3 lots for property located in between and near the intersection of Lanes Ponds Road and Miller Road. The applicant, since that time, has pursued outside agency approvals, revisions to the plans, works with their professionals. But under the statute for a minor subdivision, the lease is very short, and we only have 190 days. And I can say only 190 days in front of this body because we all know that this is a process. So I'm here asking for an additional 190-day extension. from when this board acts and adopts a resolution to allow us time to finish out the approvals, create the plat, have it approved by your professionals and record it. I would just note for the board's information, when the application was presented, and it remains the same, it was variance-free and waiver-free. The zoning of the property hasn't changed. The property itself, other than the leaves changing, hasn't changed. So those conditions, when you found it appropriate to approve it, remain the same. And as part of this application, that intersection of Miller and Lanes Pond, the applicant is dedicating to the township about 15,000 square feet, so that intersection can be redesigned into a right angle. So there's some benefits that were part of the application. So I would just ask for that additional time. Spoke with my clients and my engineer before coming here, and we feel confident that that's the time that's necessary in order to perfect this.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. Ron, we don't have to open this to the public, right?
It's not required to be open to the public.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second that?
Roll call?
Mr. Dorado?
Yes.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Chief Kudrick?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Leggio?
Yes.
Mr. Everett?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Donnell?
Yes.
Chairman Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Yes, enjoy. Okay, for the next case, case number SP-1041A, Smith Family Properties, I'll be recusing myself, and Vice Chair Husser will be taking over for the rest of the evening. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Just enjoy that. You enjoy yourself.
Evening, Mr. Chairman,
Counselor.
members of the board. Frank Accusano on behalf of the Smith family. Our application here tonight is for really bifurcated approval. We are looking for preliminary site plan approval for the overall project and final approval for the first stage. It's a flex warehouse space. We know that the board is excited to hear about that. We think that our application is a little different than the one that you've been puzzling over these last few months. We're very happy to be here. I don't want to take up time from my experts, so we're going to proceed with my first witness, Jason Fichter.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Jason Fichter, F-I-C-H-T-E-R.
Jason, let me start.
Yep.
Give the board the benefit of your education, licensure, and experience, please.
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer and professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I've been licensed as an engineer since '03 and a planner since '04 or '02 and '03, thereabouts. And I've appeared before this board a number of times, as well as about 80 or so other boards throughout the state.
Credentials accepted.
Thank
I've
you.
often been both a planner and an engineer. Also, did you prepare the site plans that the board is considering tonight, or were they prepared under your direct supervision?
Yes,
Okay, in a narrative form, would you please tell us what this application is all about?
yes. So I prepared an exhibit. I'm not sure who's at the wheel of the exhibits up there, but it might be helpful if we had the colored rendering up there. Are you controlling that, Laura? Okay. Do you have the colored rendering?
Is it on?
It is. Okay, all right, while we're pulling that up, let me just start off. So we're talking about Block 49, Lot 7. This is 289 Lakewood Farmingdale Road. As for the road name, there was a comment in CME's review letter about what is the actual name of the road, because we show Squonkam on the plan. There was some confusion there. I checked the tax map, and that labels the road as Lakewood Farmingdale Road, so that's what we'll call it here forward. Altogether, the property is 10.03 acres. We're in the SED zone, that's the Special Economic Development Zone. One of the key purposes of the SED zone, which is stated right in the ordinance in the SED section, is, quote, The purpose of the SED zone is to provide for a variety of economic development opportunities in areas of the township where rail and highway infrastructure are readily available. So that's something I'm going to come back to throughout because I think that's a very key point for this application. The property is located on a county road, and we have immediate access to Route 195. We're very close. As a matter of fact, Laura, there's well, there you go. Okay, so when you
All right,
talk
so
about...
just before we move on, so we'll mark as A13 color rendering of the site plan?
That is, we labeled that one aerial exhibit.
Okay, aerial exhibit,
Yep.
okay.
And what you'll notice is the subject property is the rendered one right in the middle. And if you follow, it's labeled Squonkam Road. Sorry about that. It's Lakewood Farmingdale Road. If you follow that down on the sheet, you'll see kind of a fork in the road. That's the entrance to Route 195. That's how close we are. I know you all know the property, but just wanted to point that out. The rear of the property, you can see where it's just green back there. That has a stream and wetlands. The wetlands back there have a 150-foot buffer, and the stream has a 300-foot riparian zone, and we're not proposing any development in those areas. And those areas, separated by that dashed black line toward the back, total about 2.2 acres or 22% of the site. So that's a significant amount of area of the site that we're not touching. So the applicant seeking approval to maintain the existing building, that's the smaller building shown on the exhibit there. It's about 12,050 square feet. And then construct, there it is, that's the existing building. And then construct 3 new buildings, which are about 42,500 square feet each. So the total square footage of all the buildings at total build-out would be 139,550 square feet. The buildings would be used as flex space, and the site includes ancillary improvements such as parking, lighting, and landscaping. The existing building will have parking in the front and 2 overhead doors on the same facade, the north elevation. And then the 3 new buildings are identical to each other. They're 250 feet wide by 145 feet deep. They have pedestrian access and parking on the north elevation and overhead doors on the south elevation. And then internally, there's a second floor mezzanine in each building that provides for office space to support the warehouse. So the buildings are proposed to be used as flex space, which is a permitted use. In other words, the vast majority of the square footage will be used as warehouse, and the balance will be used as office space that's associated with its respective warehouse space. For example, if a plumber wants to rent space, they'll store their parts and equipment in the warehouse, and then they'll have a small office area where they can run their business. The standard analysis of flex space, especially when tenants are unknown, is to assume 20% of the gross floor area will be used as office. And this is typically controlled by parking. Now, we happen to be overparked, and I'm going to go through that in detail in a few because I know that is a question. But the bottom line is that this site can easily support the proposed flex space as shown on the exhibit. The applicant's proposing to complete this project in 2 phases, and that's really going to be driven by tenants when the tenants come along and sign their leases and the terms of those leases. Based on what we know now, the plan is to construct the front building, obviously leave the existing building where it is, and then phase 2 would be the rear 2 buildings. That's the plan as it stands now. For utilities, water, gas, and electric are all available along the property's frontage, so we're able to easily tap into those directly along our frontage. We're also going to connect a sewer within the right-of-way. Sewer is available a little bit south along Lakewood Farmingdale Road, and we're currently putting a big effort in on making that happen through a wastewater management plan amendment. And we've been working with the DEP and the county on that, and we're getting there. And a footnote on that as well, there happens to be a sewer easement through the rear of the property that's in that restricted area in the riparian zone. We can't really connect to that because that's a restricted area, but our neighbor to the north does. And the applicant has been in discussions with that neighbor about possibly running sewer onto their property, which would then connect it to that sewer easement in the back. It would be an easier way to go in terms of construction, a little more gymnastics in terms of logistics, But the bottom line is, for sewer for this project, we have two options, and at least one of the two is going to work out for us, so we're not concerned about sewer. Stormwater, this is a major development for stormwater, and that's a key threshold I'm sure you've heard a lot about. So we designed this site to comply with your ordinance for stormwater quantity, quality, and recharge. We're collecting runoff throughout the site with inlets and pipes, and then we're directing that runoff to underground basins. Ultimately, the runoff is going to discharge into the right-of-way of the road, as it does today, albeit at the reduced rates, which is what the regulations require us to do. And the dirty impervious areas will pass through water quality units to be cleaned up to meet that water quality requirement as well before they're discharged into those underground basins. For traffic, we have two full movement driveways, one at each end of the property's frontage, and then we have 30-foot wide aisles circulating the site. Parking is placed on the northern end of the site in order to keep the southern portion of the site clear for loading at the overhead doors. The three identical buildings each have a series of overhead doors along their southern frontage, and the area in front of these doors was designed for loading operations with a box truck. A box truck can back up to the building and still leave 30 feet clear for the drive aisle around the building. If a tractor trailer needs to access the site, we analyzed that as well, it's shown on the plans. What the plan is with that is that the tractor trailer would be able to pull up next to the building. We'd be able to get two per building in the back. When it does that, we would still leave the 30-foot drive aisle wide open. And that operation and solution was derived through conversations with the applicant about what the anticipated use is and type of truck traffic that may be anticipated here. So we feel that that's a solid solution that leaves options for these buildings. So parking. There's a few ways to determine how many parking spaces are required for this development, and we conservatively calculated 174 are required. We're showing 175 on the plan, so there's one extra, so we comply. The parking requirement comes from your ordinance. Your ordinance has no ratio for flex space, so we took a look at what might
Well,
most
can I just stop you there on the flex space?
Yes.
Because my understanding is, looking at the ordinance, we don't have flex space as one of the permitted uses.
Yep.
I don't think this is a prohibited use.
Right.
Because offices are permitted, and warehouses are permitted,
Yes.
and accessory uses are permitted. But
Yes.
when you say that flex space is a permitted use, I don't know that that's
So I'm
Accurate.
using.
I think it's just shorthand. We're going to use it as an abbreviation, but we understand that the ordinance doesn't say flex space is permitted.
Well, that's why it doesn't have a parking standard, though.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I'm going to solve that for you, but
He's got the
in terms of the use and the language, I'm using the term flex space. It's a commonly used term, but to put it in the context of your ordinance, you have warehouse and you have office. That's what flex space is, warehouse and office. It's just very little office in relation to the warehouse. And flex for flexible, different users come in and out, the size of it can be changed depending on the tenant, that type of thing. So I agree with you, it's permitted, and if we're to use the same language as the ordinance, it would be warehouse and office, and that's where I'm using the term flex space, just as an all-encompassing term, if that's okay. So,
Let me just ask one question before you go on. I'm sorry, Robin. I believe in our ordinance, our warehouse space says that you could have a minimum of 5,000 square foot per.
so if a building is at least 40,000 square feet, you can have multiple tenants in the building as long as each tenant is at least 5,000 square feet.
Correct.
And we're good with all that.
Is that a plan? Is that going to impact the parking differently?
No,
No.
no. So total square footage, regardless of how many tenants are in there, that's what's going to drive the parking requirement.
But just to be clear also, unlike a warehouse, which is just a warehouse and you open it up to perhaps anybody who wants to store their goods there, what this proposal is that the office component drives what the warehouse is going to be. So if the plumber's in the office, the warehouse portion of it's going to be for the plumber, or if an electrician is there.
Yes.
Or a contractor is there. So it's not just generally open to, whoever you want to lease space to store goods. It has to be accessory to what the office is being used for.
I agree 100%.
Okay.
Yes, the office would be ancillary to the warehouse. You would not rent it to a plumber and then, a realtor or something like that. It's going to be the single user in each space. They may want no office, they may want a little bit of office, it's up to that particular user. But yes, you're right. It'll be a single user with the warehouse and the office. And
Okay.
storing your goods, I think that's more of like a self-storage place. That's not the intention here. This is for single users, like a plumber or...
Well, what I'm saying is, a ship is not going to be pulling up to the dock in Elizabeth with tractor trailers loading up and coming down to this facility. It's going to be, the goods that are associated with, and I'll stick with your example, the plumber. It's going to be the goods that he needs to perform his job.
Correct.
Just so I can kind of understand, you didn't provide a dedicated loading area because you said the tractor trailers are just going to drive up?
No,
and
it's
you s-
dedicated.
Okay, but they're just going to drive up, and you said that's adequate given the users. So what users are you anticipating in your flex use?
Well, the applicant, I think he's planning to come up here. He might be able to go into more detail on that. As far as I know, there's no signed leases, right? But there have been discussions with various users, and that's what kind of drove how these loading operations would occur. The original design we had no provision for tractor trailers. It was all box truck. I kind of insisted on it because I figured it would make sense based on the building. So that's why we have at least two tractor trailers would be able to pull up to each building. But what I'm being told is what is expected here is box trucks. And then we're able to back up the box trucks to those overhead doors, still leaving that 30-foot drive aisle open. So the area that is directly adjacent to the building on its southern facade, that is dedicated loading. It will be at least, I think it's 30 feet exactly, or thereabouts, 30 feet off the back of the building for the width of the building on the southern facade. That's loading only.
To get back to the subject of warehouse space versus office, you've used a number of 20%. as the
So,
rate.
yeah, I'm going to go through all that. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is,
And that might be a partial answer to your question.
yes.
As to,
Yeah, I have some testimony coming up that might put your mind at ease about the office space and the parking and so on. Yes.
So if a tractor trailer pulls in here and we have, 5 box trucks
Can't do that.
backed in,
Yeah,
Well-
so that has to be planned out between the users. Now, mind you, one user might take the whole building, 2 users might take the building. I guess you could have up to, 5,000 square feet apiece, I don't think you're going to get small users like that. It's a big building. You're going to get bigger users in there. They're going to have to coordinate it amongst themselves. But again, what I'm being told is the expectation for tractor trailers is little to none.
and then as far as the tractor trailers exiting the property, they're gonna have to leave from the southbound, go to the northbound side and pass all the parked cars where all the foot traffic is, right?
So they would I guess you could enter on either side, but our anticipation is they're going to enter on the north side
On
of
the
the
north side
site.
and pull around?
They're going to go all the way around back, yep, and then they're going to travel along that southern access aisle up to the back of the building.
But there's no turnarounds, there's nothing, as far as the tractor trailer is concerned, it's pretty much one way in
It's a loop.
and I understand, it's one way in, one way out, but there's a 55-foot tractor trailer or 45-foot tractor, if they had to jackknife or got into themselves into a predicament, where,
So the way the site is designed is you're not going to need an area to turn around. So the 30-foot drive aisle is designed to remain open at all times. Loading operations is not going to interrupt the drive aisle. So if they come in on the north side, they're always going to have a clear path out. Even if they stop and pull up to a building, when the loading operation's done, they're going to have a clear path out. Free flow.
and then how are those tractor trailers getting unloaded? They're just gonna get pallet jacked off? instead of backing into a bay?
That's correct, yeah, that's up to the user, however they want to work that out. They're not going to back up to the bay, though.
All right.
All right, so if everyone's good, I'll carry on with parking. All right, so, and forgive me, but I'll continue to use the term flex space. It's almost like an abbreviation for warehouse and office and all that, so.
We're not here to play semantics.
So your ordinance, again, you don't have a parking ratio for flex space. So we took a look at what you do have in your ordinance, and we selected what we thought most closely relates, and that's shopping center. And I agree, that is a bit off, but I'll explain. So it's not a direct match, and it resulted in a very conservative calculation for parking. The reason we felt there was a relation there is because the shopping center requirement says 20% of the gross floor area can be used for office. And that's the generic standard for flex space as well, that you would account for about 20% of the gross floor area. The difference, of course, with shopping centers versus what we're proposing is the remaining 80% will be used much more intensely in a shopping center than it will in this warehouse in terms of parking. So your shopping center ratio brings us to 174 parking spaces required. So another way to calculate it out of your ordinance is to use the office and warehouse parking ratios and do them together and split it up. So that's a more accurate way of doing it, breaking it down. And when we do that, we come up with a requirement of 112 spaces, well under the 175 we're proposing. In my opinion, the most accurate way to calculate parking is with the ITE parking generation manual. These are the people that study similar facilities throughout the country and how much parking is really happening there. It's, in terms of parking design, it's kind of the Bible in the industry for where you're going to get accurate numbers for parking ratios. So I took a look at that, and it describes warehouses as being, quote, devoted to the storage of materials, but they may also include office and maintenance areas. So when we look at that method and use their ratios, we get a parking requirement of 71 spaces, which is over 100 spaces less than what we're proposing. So we took a look at all three methods of analyzing the parking requirement. We have the two that are more accurate that resulted in 112 and 71. The highest of those two, of course, being 112. What we selected in the design is we used 174 parking spaces, and we chose that method because we felt it would be your preference. And obviously, we'd be open to negotiate down on that, but just for the sake of design and getting it in, we took the safe route here, figuring you'd prefer to see the parking spaces, so we put them on there. Refuse is going to be managed by a private company. We have two exterior refuse enclosures, but we anticipate the majority of refuse is going to be handled internal to each unit, including ample space for recycled materials. Pickup timing and locations is going to be coordinated by a private company. Lighting, we're proposing a series of building and pole-mounted lights throughout the site, and our goal is to provide appropriate lighting levels for the operations areas and avoid spillage onto adjacent properties, and we achieve that in our design. We have 36 building-mounted lights, and we have 5 pole-mounted lights for a total of 41 lights throughout the site. All the lights are going to be LED. They'll be mounted at 18 feet high, and they're all downward facing, which goes to the requirement in your ordinance that is looking to prevent any light radiating above the horizontal plane passing through the light source. The areas around the building and the paved areas meet your requirement of 0.3 foot candles minimum and the half-foot candle average. In terms of landscaping, our goal here was to landscape the front of the property to make the streetscape look as attractive as it can in a warehouse environment. And then we're framing the north, south, and west property line with red maples. Now, granted, there was some comments in the review letters about switching up the species of those trees, and we have no issue with that. So we can easily do that. We're also proposing to add a screen of arborvitae along adjacent Lot 6 to our southeast. Or if I could impose upon you to zoom into that row of arbs down there so everybody can see it. There we go. So Lot 5 and Lot 6 are actually under common ownership, and there's a residential building there. I'll get more into that in a little bit. But anyway, Our goal there was to put that row of arbs. We also have a fence in that location. In the front yard, it's 4 feet, and then beyond that, it's 6 feet, and then we have the arbs, and that's our buffer to the residential property to our south.
Just to be clear, does that comply with the ordinance?
Which one? The buffer
requires a
requirement? No, I'm going to
50-foot.
get more into the buffer requirements. We do not meet the ordinance. That's part of the relief we'll be seeking.
I'd also like to reserve on that subject, on the subject of whether or not that is in fact a residence. It's zoned SED. I'll present some...
Understood. The engineer testified that it contained a residential building, so I just want the board, typically, we kind of are associated with relief, so the board should understand that that will be a variance that's required with the application.
Okay, still want to address it, though, on the subject of what actually exists.
Yeah, I am going to get into more, we'll put an asterisk on that for the moment. I'm going to get into that more. He's right, that's a residential use asterisk. We'll get there. Okay. There were a number of comments in the review letters about trees and tree removal requirements, all that kind of stuff. We have no issue complying with all of that. We can work with your professionals and hopefully just
Well,
make them happy on that.
well, tree removal, though, I mean, it's not a matter of complying. There's relief that's associated with that as well, correct?
It's a contribution dollar amount, I think is what the comment was driving towards. We calculated it on the plans, and I think Ms. Sparrow might have had a different calculation, so we can tighten up
I don't think
that
that's it at all. You require a waiver, because if you can't plant the trees on site in accordance with our ordinance, the board has to review the documented practical and physical difficulties and undue hardship related to the conditions of the site from which the trees are to be removed. And that-
Agreed. So that section of the ordinance talks about different methods of mitigating tree removal, and the last option is if it can't work out, then the board may
Well,
grant.
I can just tell you that we went through this in depth on a less controversial application. And the board made a formal finding that in interpreting that ordinance, that relief is required, and those are the proofs that are necessary.
I don't disagree.
So at some point, you know, whoever the appropriate witness is, you know, those proofs have to go in as to, you know, the elements that Laura listed.
Yep, no problem.
Okay.
Gotcha. All right, so the site was designed to provide perimeter plantings, which hopefully is plainly evident on the exhibit that's up now, and also to preserve the environmentally sensitive areas which are in the rear yard. So we have limited space to landscape between the parking areas and the building, but we edit as much as we could. There is a requirement in your ordinance to do that, but we're a bit constrained here, and we'll talk about this more later, but we have the narrow property, we have 22% in the rear taken away. We have the issue of utilization, so that what we tried to do here is mitigate what your ordinance is looking for, frame in the site with some perimeter plantings, and then get as much planting as we can up along the road and a little bit in around the buildings as well. In terms of signs, we don't have tenants yet, so we're unsure of signage, but we are showing a freestanding sign along the frontage, anticipating that whoever's in there is going to want something, even if just for emergency identification or deliveries. The applicant's going to work with each tenant to finalize their signage programs, but we do anticipate whatever signage goes in there final will comply with your ordinance. And if for some reason it doesn't, that tenant is going to have to come back to you to seek that relief, because our application to you is for compliant signage. One design waiver that I wanted to hit is sidewalk. So your ordinance requires sidewalk along the frontage and then a connecting sidewalk from the building to that sidewalk. And that's not something that we propose because we don't believe it's appropriate in this location. There's no other sidewalk in the area. And it's not the type of use that's going to generate foot traffic, especially in this area here. So I think that would be wrap up for engineering testimony unless there's any questions. Yes, sir.
How about as far as, because of the size of the property, I know this winter doesn't really justify snow removal, but you don't have a lot of area here to, if we were to get a major storm or multiple storms, where are we going to pile snow? And my concern is with all the box trucks and tractor trailers picking up all the oil off the parking lot, and then you're going to be pushing the snow, I'm assuming, to the back of the property, to the wetlands area, where are we going to be piling snow? Where's that relief?
Yeah, so that's an age-old operation, right? It's been happening forever, and we'll continue to have to deal with that. I guess it depends on the tenants and how they plan to use the property. If there's some area in the pavement, the goal of the snow removal company is going to be to make the shortest movement possible. The worst-case scenario here is to clear the whole area and dump it into the backyard. Short of that, if there's some area that's free, somebody's not using an overhead, they'll pile it where they
Oh,
can,
yeah,
shortest
obviously,
distance.
yeah. Okay.
I always like to say proper planning prevents poor performance.
You
And
missed the word, but I got you.
Maybe because I'm
It's public
Little
forum.
horse.
Yeah.
But you have 3 buildings, 1 existing. I understand the economics, you want to maximize the space, but there could be a lot of foreseen problems here. I don't understand your garbage refuge, where internally the applicants are going to handle it. You get a light manufacturer in one of these warehouses of, say, furniture, gets boxes because the furniture comes in. How is he internally going to handle his refuge?
So I've seen that on a lot of different warehouses where they have some sort of container right by the overhead door, whether it's, a large container, small container, something like that. And when it gets full, they call up the company, they pull up to the overhead, they either unload and reload, or they grab the container and go.
How's that going to interfere with the overhead loading the dock?
That would be loading. That would be part of the loading operation.
But it would totally impact your loading. So you need a waiver for your loading stall size, so it has to be 10 feet by 60.
We have that,
How do you have that on these buildings? I thought you said it,
parallel to the building.
but you said box trucks are going to be backing into them.
Not at the same time. I mean, you're either going to have a box truck, you're going to have a tractor trailer. We're not anticipating much in the way of tractor trailers.
But by way of a box truck, do you have a 10-foot by 60-foot area?
A box truck isn't 60 feet long, but we
But
have.
you don't. So your only plan is to do the parallel.
If you want to pull up the plan, the truck turning plan, you'll see the larger loading area. That's on the,
And where would you envision these containers to
Containers.
be when I want to stay on this plan because you're saying
Sure.
the containers would be back here, and the question is, how does that impact your loading? So
no, they
these
would
are
be
your doors,
inside the building.
and they're going to get rolled out?
However, if they have a small one, if they have cans, if they have a larger container, it's however that particular tenant chooses to operate. But yes, what I've seen most of the time in warehouses is there's some container near the loading door, and it becomes part of their loading operation, whoever makes that collection. Obviously, if a truck is sitting there, we're not talking about parking trucks there and leaving them there.
I understand, but our ordinance requires, and you may recall this from another application, that you provide us the storage that's required for the refuse and the recyclables.
Yes.
So I think what the question is saying is it's hard to know how much refuse or recyclables that you're going to have and whether or not you have adequate containment for that provided on site.
So the way I see that, first of all, let's not forget, we do have 2 outside refuse areas, right? So we should be able to manage a lot of it out there. What I anticipate is going to happen is each tenant in the warehouse space is going to manage their own refuse internally. We have a building that's 42,500 square feet. I think that's more than ample. There's going to be a corner somewhere that's going to provide them more than ample space to collect their refuse and recyclables. And if by some unforeseen reason it becomes an issue, all they have to do is increase the frequency of pickup.
Who manages the site?
Well, I think,
It'll be owner managed.
The whole complex?
well, the tenant's going to be responsible for their own place and operation and whatnot, but the owner will, own the property and lease the space out.
But you said we could split these up in, the 42,500 could get split up into individual 5,000 square feet, pieces, right?
Sure.
Theoretically.
Okay, so if each building, let's just say, let's anticipate, because you like to use that word anticipate, let's anticipate that every building is going to get split into, for economic reasons, the guy wants to max out the dollar amount, 5,000 square feet each, divided into the 42.5. So this is our question about the refuge. Now you have all these tenants in each building. Are they going to be sharing 1 box, 2 boxes? Are they all going to walk the refuge to the designated area? That's what you're saying if it's one guy at 42,500,
No.
it's one thing, but now we're talking,
Yeah.
we could be 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, 5,000 all the way down, correct?
That's absolutely correct, and the point is well taken, but that's really the subject, and by the way, we have no objection to it being a condition of approval, but our leases are gonna require that tenants, whether there's 5 in one building, 1 or 2, manage their refuse in accordance with what we provide in the form of dumpsters or internally. What I think you're worried about is outside disposal of trash, making a mess out there, or interference with deliveries and pickups. And we can provide in our leases that that's all gonna be done internally without interference. It's not gonna be a problem,
Frank, only because we have these flex spaces in town,
yes,
and we've experienced these problems
okay?
from previous testimony, this is why I'm raising the concern, because I am familiar with spaces that have said the same thing, and we wind up having problems with our code enforcement, going out enforcing boxes all over the place, refuge all over the place. So containment becomes a problem when we see these flex spaces, especially when they're subdivided into the 5,000 square foot multiple tenants.
Right.
So I appreciate your testimony, what you're saying, and very candidly, thinking like we've experienced it. I've sat on the council for 8 years, and I've heard the testimony from residents coming up to me and saying, I live near a warehouse and the garbage is all over the place. And then we send out code enforcement. So we're trying to plan it a little bit better. Our experience is that tenants typically don't go to one refuge. They like to, they're working people, there's an operation going on. They take their boxes, they pile them up. As you said, some of them do have, I've never seen containers inside the building. I've always seen them outside. I'm not even sure that would be permitted, having them indoors, but I'm not familiar. But we've had this problem, and I just think we have to have a better plan than what we're showing here.
I think, to Frank's point, I mean, that's the easiest way to solve it to me. It's got to be a requirement of the lease. So if the owner sees an outdoor container or refuse is blown around the property, wherever, that's a violation of the lease, and that's actionable by the owner. So our intention in design is that the refuse will be collected internally, not externally.
And you can never, what the concept is, and I understand it, and we would all like to do it, is to legislate against violations of the law. It's like a speed limit. You can put up a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, people will do 80. And we can't guarantee that there won't be a tenant who doesn't try to get sloppy, so to speak, with this project. That's a landlord problem, and I'd like to point out, by the way, that the applicant is on site. His business is there.
I could appreciate that. And as a landlord in my other world, sometimes I see the carting companies come and take my tenants' garbage and not put the container back behind the enclosure. So things happen. And I'm an on-site landlord as well. So I just think this plan isn't adequate for this size buildings.
Yeah, Frank, what we're trying to touch on is the narrowness of the site, okay, from front to back, side to side, with the 3 proposed buildings. You know what I mean? And that's what we're looking at. And I also think you should have your landscape guys, revisit something more deer-friendly than arborvitaes. I know arborvitaes are the common thing to put around here, but you have access from the back, from the wetlands area. There's thousands of deer around here. They're gonna come right up at night, jump a fence, if you even have a fence back there, and they're gonna tear up your arborvitae line. So I'm just telling you, from being in the landscape business, arborvitaes are not the solution as far as trying to make a screen. We need to pick something that's gonna be more, deer-friendly, because we don't want this place to look like in a couple of years after the deer. You ever seen arborvitae, how it's eaten halfway up and it looks ridiculous after a couple seasons?
That was a comment in the
Yeah.
review letter, so we will make that change.
I just think that that's an important issue too, because once you guys get your final approval, and then if half this stuff gets eaten in a couple seasons, we know the landlord's not gonna go back and replace the trees because he's already got his approvals.
Yeah,
We've dealt with that, we've dealt with that in the past too, so.
Sure, that's an easy fix. We can make that change.
Okay. Anything else, Chair?
Anything else?
Cornell?
I intend to recall Jason as a planning expert a little further on in the proceedings. Can I just have a minute with him?
Sure.
Jay, what you want to talk to?
Only here, there.
Counselor, you need 5 minutes?
Yeah, yes.
All right.
Can we take a break?
So we're going to take a break for 5 minutes.
miss you.
It's all the way over on this end. It's all on the ground. I'll go put it on. This way it's on.
We don't have the stream behind you? Poorly, that word's poorly.
No. We've had some problems with these places with reference.
I mean, the ordinance says zone for this. There's no past tense. They made it very
And they have to say.
This is a basin. This is a basin. They're all underground.
I think it's this one. Yes.
So old school, so nice. First of all, take ski.
There's no, it's close. I don't think it's close.
So, it was very refreshing. What's the easiest trail? He says, let's do, just go around the lake. You know, you go to the lighthouse.
Yes, and that's up to the council. I have nothing to do with it.
Shut up.
It's their next meeting. They'll probably do it. So we just gotta wait and see. They could appoint somebody from the outside or they can move up.
You know what I'm going with.
Yes, but it's up to the council. No.
Can you send it to me?
Oh, no. Good they are. That's right.
Another one.
I read about them recently.
It was actually just in the transcript yesterday.
We could be 5 minutes away. I know we're not here. I'm just turning around and going back the way we came. So I'm gonna get another 20.
Well, the problem is for the state, if they go in there and close it down, they gotta find someplace else.
You know what? I have a good sense of direction because I take in a lot when I'm out. I'm very alert. I recognize trees, this and that. And we got about 30 minutes for dinner.
It's not in the best condition.
Right, they're not in the best condition.
Yes.
Where's this?
It's not a half of a house, it's like, developmentally disabled.
It's right if you're on Woodrow and 43 and you make a right turn.
CDs.
There's no supervise, right.
Whenever you're ready, Chairman.
I'm good. Can you imagine?
Ready? The planning board will now reconvene.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My next witness is Anthony Scalise, our architect. I'd like to note for the record that we submitted something on the thumb drive or a CD of the elevations of the building that are not accurate. We have additional exhibits here, which I'll ask Andrew to
see that.
identify after he's qualified. But let's start with,
Don't worry about it. He said-
Can you try and just bring that up as close as you can to the board as possible? Thank you.
All right, so we'll need to
That's where
mark this. What are we up to, A14?
14.
So A14 will be revised architecturals dated what?
what's it dated, Anthony?
August 1st, 2019.
And that's both the floor plan and the elevations?
Yes, I have elevation, floor plans and elevations, yes.
Is it 2 sheets or 3 sheets? Just so we can put it together. 4 sheets, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ask that Mr. Scalise be sworn.
Yeah, you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please state and spell your name for the record.
Antonio Scalise, S-C-A-L-I-S-E.
Mr. Scalise, would you give the board the benefit of your education, your licensure, and your experience?
Sure. I was licensed in 2005. I'm a licensed architect in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. I've been before many boards in New Jersey, and I'm a fellow planning board member in West Long Branch.
Okay, we'll accept your credentials as an architect.
If you would.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you have to hold it through close because we've got to be doing on the table.
If you would describe for the board what our building is going to look like and what the composition is going to be internally and the other architectural details.
Sure. The building is going to be a pre-manufactured building, a pre-structured building, where there's going to be aluminum insulated panels for the majority of it, and then there's going to be a base of CMU block. The floor plan, as discussed, is going to be a composition of office spaces along with warehouse space. And a lot of the architecturals were driven from the comments from the engineer. If I can dive to the elevations for a second. There was one comment about a wall not having a blank or uninterrupted length exceeding 50 feet without including a reveal and so forth. We identified on all 4 elevations, we provided a painted stripe, or we have a series of windows, ribbon windows provided on the elevation to try to break down the design, give it a little bit more aesthetic appeal for what it is. And also on the, I guess it would be on a series, the east wall and west wall has, it's an elevation option where basically it's flanking the parking lots. We have a series of ribbon windows and basically 2 stories of office area, potential office area. And part of the design talks about having a canopy that's protruding out to define the entry, and we provided that and comply with the ordinance.
Are these 2-story buildings? Or
No, it's a 1-story building, but we have like a mezzanine, if you will, like a second level of office space. But the
Mr.
majority of the building, again, like my colleague stated previously, is warehouse space with an office component.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would state is these weren't submitted for review, so when they're testifying that this addresses our ordinance standards that we have cited as design waiver relief since May, and these were revised in August, we haven't
you
seen them.
haven't seen them?
And I don't know if the plan shows this potential canopy area and where that would be on the engineering drawings either.
Understood. So Ron, in this case, his professionals haven't seen any of these.
Well, the board has options. I mean, it can listen to the testimony, but, it doesn't appear to me that, we'll be in a position to render a decision one way or the other tonight.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really up to the applicant. It may be useful to continue, so if there are other issues that come up, there are things that can be addressed between now and the next meeting.
Is everyone all right with that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we understand that Laura and the engineers are going to have to take a look at what we presented, since this is apparently fresh, and we're prepared to address any comments that they might have.
Okay.
But in your opinion, recognizing that it hadn't been reviewed by Laura, does it meet the requirements of the ordinance in terms of breaking up mass, providing the necessary or required appearance of the buildings on all facades?
Yes, our intent was to comply based on the comments from the engineer, yes. And I apologize, I thought this was submitted because we were carried, obviously, a few times, so we were under the assumption these were already submitted. I was not aware that she didn't have them, so my apologies on that.
Those are all the questions I have for Mr. Scalise.
Questions from the board?
Well, I'm just, with the flex space, warehouse space, mezzanine office, and I understand a lot of it relies on figuring out who the tenants are and what they need. Is it going to be a central entry for the front of the buildings and then?
So I think the one elevation option that is shown, which you can't see it here, but it's on this upper left side. It's really intended for the street side, where you could see we have the parking lot, which is the east side. Yes. So basically, central to that parking lot, right on the building, is where our canopy would be installed. And I think that elevation option was intended on the street side to give the street side something a little bit more appealing with some ribbon windows versus just seeing a blank wall of, the typical aluminum insulated panels that come with the pre-structured building.
But if that warehouse is broken into 5 separate tenants, so you come in that main entrance and there's a hallway that leads to 5?
So I think, again, because it's not defined again, the tenants, and I apologize, you're asking good questions, and unfortunately, we just don't know what's going to happen yet. But I think the intent on that side of the wall, there would be 2 levels of office space, and whether or not it's one tenant or multiple tenants, they could go through there, but they do still have their individual entrances on both the north and south side.
Oh, so I guess that's what I was confused about. So there are going to be individual doors on the north side for people
Yes.
to enter as well as opposite of loading docks?
Yes, my client was trying to provide, again, it was more for the street side as kind of an option to give the elevation, the building, a little bit more of like an office look, if you will, just by providing ribbon windows, 2 levels, and also providing the canopy, which gives it an aesthetic appeal.
Have you completed any other projects that are similar to this
Yes,
locally?
in Dayton, New Jersey, not locally, no.
South Brunswick?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Whereabouts in South Brunswick?
We're working for the Haddad group, and we're planning a few of those in that area.
Very similar to this one?
Yes, it's similar, yes.
Is that like the Route 130 area?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
for Mr. Scalise?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a next call, Betsy Dillon. Yeah, leave it here. Ask that
Do
be
you
sworn.
swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Elizabeth Dolan, Dolan.
Betsy, if you would provide the board with a description of your education, your licensure, and your experience.
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer registered in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And for 34 years now, I've been practicing in the field of traffic engineering. I've had the opportunity to prepare traffic studies, statements, parking studies, DOT applications. I've appeared before over 250 municipalities throughout the state. I was in Howell 10-plus years ago.
You'd be testifying as a traffic engineer?
Yes, I have been accepted in all cases.
Very accepted.
Thank you.
Betsy, if you would, in narrative form, describe,
Hold- Mr. Acasano.
This one? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
please, thank you.
Better?
Yes.
Okay, good.
describe, if you would, your observations concerning our proposals for traffic in and out, site circulation, and the rest.
Yes, certainly. Jason's office had contacted me after comments by the county were received, so we initiated our involvement with this project to address county comments, which were primarily to identify the trip generation characteristics of the development. And so we referenced the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual And we looked at a couple of different land use categories. We've talked tonight about flex space, combination of office and warehouse, semi-industrial uses, and the ITE, both the parking generation and the trip generation manuals have parking ratios and trip generation ratios for different types of industrial uses. The highest trip generation is estimated using what's identified as an industrial park. For the size of building area, which totals just under 140,000 square feet, would be about 56 trips during both the morning and evening peak hours. Of course, in the morning, you have primarily inbound, in the afternoon, primarily outbound, and overall, ITE's data indicates about 20% trucks. I think operationally, the applicant could probably explain the box truck generation versus the tractor trailer generation, but based on industry standards, those are the numbers we'd be looking at, about 56 trips during the busiest peak hours. That's not considered significant by DOT standards, by the county standards, by ITE standards. Generally, when you're at 100 or more trips in an hour, you'll start to create a measurable impact and may warrant improvements. But we are well below that, and that would also account for the nominal trip generation associated with the existing small building on site. Jason's taken you through the site circulation. The site's been designed to accommodate tractor trailers, even though we're not expecting very many of those. And the two driveways are subject, of course, to county review, but we have submitted to the county our calculations as they had requested. I know they're asking for some dedication and also ensuring that the site triangles don't require any clearing. If clearing is required, then of course we would have to do that. On parking, Jason took you through some calculations. I can provide a few more based again upon a couple of different calculations and land uses from ITE. Using their general light industrial ratio, 91 parking spaces would be required. For warehouse, 55, if it's just considered straight warehouse. And ITE's definition does say that a portion of the building is ancillary office space. An industrial park, which is what I used for the trip generation, we get 168 parking spaces, which is just under what Jason had calculated using his combination of ordinance ratio. So I think we're well within the range of acceptable parking for the different types of users that may end up in these buildings.
Based on your testimony of the IT 56 trips, do we know the hours of operation of this proposal?
The owner's going to testify. If you give me a minute, Paul, what are your hours of operation?
Basically 8 to 4:30.
8 to 4:30.
Okay. So
Can
that
you-
56 trips would be based on a 9-hour day, 9-hour day?
Well, it's based on the busiest hour generally between 7 and 9 in the morning and 4 and 6 in the weekday evening. So whatever the busiest hour is, the 56 trips is what's estimated. And that's based on the total building area.
How does ITE define an industrial park?
I don't have that definition with me, but it is more of the standard, many buildings served off of a common drive with, I think, larger buildings than are proposed. So I think it's a little bit more intensive than what is proposed here. But again, for the purposes of addressing the county comments, that's what I used because we didn't know the tenant mix here, and so that would generate a more conservative, most conservative projection.
I just, yeah, go ahead. Extras. Might be the same.
Are we looking at any road improvements for the trucks and other traffic that's turning in and out of the property?
The county has requested the 40 feet from the center line dedication. I think that they had asked about the turning movements for the vehicles. I haven't been involved one-on-one with them. Jason may have a little bit more additional information, but I know that they did have a question about the truck activity, so that was part of their commentary. I sort of handled the numbers, and Jason and Insight, that office has been handling the plans.
Did you prepare a traffic study for the county?
I prepared a statement for the county, yeah.
Was that submitted to this board?
I don't know that it was, and I know that in your review letter, it wasn't one of the items mentioned, but we
Is
can
it-
certainly provide copies if you'd like.
If you could.
How many?
5 if you can.
Just 5? Okay.
Just touching off the Deputy Mayor, because we almost were asking the same question. Did you look at the ingress and egress of these, of this site, like for traffic, for turning, radius of a truck, tractor trailer box, all that?
That's really more Jason,
problem.
and that's why he prepared that truck circulation exhibit.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Betsy. My next witness is Mr. Basil Elmers.
Okay, you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Basil Elmers, Basil, Ellmers.
And once again, if you would, Basil, give the board the benefit of your education, your licensure, and your experience.
Sure. I a Bachelor's of Science from Rutgers University. I have over 20 years as an environmental professional for a environmental consulting firm in Monmouth County. I have over 6 years as a licensed site remediation professional, licensed from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
And have you done a survey or review of the environmental conditions on this site?
Yes.
Well, just before we do that, so you're seeking just to have Mr. Elmers qualified as an LSRP,
LSRP, environmental
environmental
expert.
specialist, so. Mr. Chairman.
LSRP,
Yep.
environmental professional,
Accepted.
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, my firm, as part of this proposed redevelopment for the applicant, performed initial due diligence investigation of Phase 1 and Phase 2 assessment that addressed some initial areas of concern, one being an above-ground storage tank. Second was the historical use of the property as potentially for agricultural use and potential for pesticides and the like to be present. We did sampling to investigate those potential concerns, and all of the sampling results were below New Jersey DEP standards. And additionally, as Jason mentioned, my firm performed a wetlands delineation in 2018. The New Jersey DEP approved of an LOI, a letter of interpretation, for that rear riparian zone lot that is going to stay undeveloped as part of that. So the DEP approved that in February of 2018, and it expires in 2023, but can be extended another 5 years on top of that. There was a 150-foot buffer that was identified within that wetland zone due to an exceptional value resource there. A barred owl was determined to be present. So the DEP approved that LOI wetlands interpretation. And then finally, there was, in associated with the proposed sewer service connection, a habitat suitability test was performed, or determination, and that the findings of that, because of the barred owl presence, ultimately the findings of that there was not going to be any adverse or negative impact from the proposed development.
And you've heard a description of the operations that are proposed, including traffic and waste disposal. From your perspective as an environmental expert, do you see any concerns that arise as a result of that proposal?
No.
That's all I have, Mr. Elmer.
Yeah, the Environmental Commission reviewed Mr. Elmer's firm's due diligence investigation, and when we found that there was no issues with it, so I don't know if anyone has any questions on the environmental.
If there are no questions, my next witness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Gary Smith, the applicant.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Gary Smith, S-M-I-T-H.
Gary, you are one of the members of the Smith family, are you not? LLC?
Yes.
Okay. And you, in fact, conduct your business on this property, do you not?
Yes, I do.
Will you continue to conduct your business on this property?
Yes, I'm going to take the back building.
A couple of questions concerning operations. For one thing, it hasn't been discussed, do you propose that there's going to be any outside storage of vehicles, boats, materials?
Some of our pickup trucks might be outside, but no outside storage at all.
Do you understand that, by the way, do you have any tenants? Are there any leases signed at this
I
time?
have one that's tentative. They're waiting to find out when we can start building and to get out.
And what would the proposed use be?
He's an aluminum manufacturer. He wants to take the center building, he wants to take 30,000 square feet of the 42,000 square feet.
Right. Do you understand that as tenants go in, you'll have to get zoning permits for
Absolutely.
each one of them for the
Yep.
proposed
Use
use?
changes.
What are you anticipating your tenant population is going to look like once you're built out?
Well, the back building is going to be for us. The middle building is going to be for the other company, which is going to take, like I said, 30,000 out of the 42. So there might be one other tenant in there, maybe two. And the front building is open right now. We don't know who's going to be in the front building yet.
But what type of uses are you anticipating?
It's basically all manufacturing.
Well, can I just ask a question on that?
Uh-huh.
I mean, the proffer here was that it was going to be warehouse and office. Is there manufacturing that's on site, or is it just manufactured off-site and the product is brought here?
I think both. I mean, it's, as I know, the SED says you can do manufacturing in these buildings.
Well, that wasn't my question, though. My
Yeah.
question was, when the testimony was given tonight, there was no testimony about manufacturing. It was all office and warehouse.
We don't know at this stage.
Well, you said you did at the beginning, didn't you?
No, we talked about plumber's office.
You said flex space, office, warehouse.
Correct.
Manufacturing is neither office nor warehouse.
We need to refine the test. It's our intention that there will be no uses in this property that aren't permitted in the SED zone.
Well, that's way different, though, than I think what was testified to. You testified to, because we asked, what is flex space? Because flex space is not defined in the ordinance. And Mr. Fichter, properly identified office and warehouse.
Right.
There was not a, discussion
I understand what you're
about manufacturing.
Mr. Smith,
Yes,
what do you currently operate out of there?
we have a glass company.
And that's in the existing build?
It's in this small building right there.
So you plan on moving the entire operation to the back building?
Yes.
So Frank, maybe when we started this tonight, you should have told us that the owner's intent was to move that to the back, and that would have alleviated a lot of our questions about all this traffic, all these trucks and all this. If he's gonna be taking 42.5, and then the aluminum guy's gonna take 30,000,
Yeah.
so that only leaves us with the 42.5 plus,
Well, but the board's concerns that are raised is that we really don't know. We're hopeful that these things are going to happen. So the testimony that we're presenting is, if you would, worst case scenario. But Ron is right. I don't mean to indicate, and our testimony should have been more refined. If it's a permitted use in the SED zone, we would intend to rent to tenants who comply with the ordinance in all other respects, not necessarily limited to warehouse. And that should be clarified.
and we don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I understand.
So he answered the question already about moving 42.5 right to the back for his purpose.
Right.
So that answers a lot of questions right there.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
just a question right here. What is, can you just describe the potential tenant of aluminum manufacturing?
He gets coils of aluminum in, and he makes angles and some siding and stuff for small contractors.
Like fabrication?
Yeah, he has the
Okay.
brake and the shears
Gotcha,
and
okay.
bends it and stuff like that.
Okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Smith, how long have you had a business there for?
We've been there 2 years, 3 years, we put the building up.
Are you a Howell resident as well?
No, but I've been associated with Howell for my whole life.
Right. Well, thank you for wanting to keep your businesses here.
We were down at the Gateway Center
Right?
for a while.
Okay.
And then we moved over to Squonkam, over to Adelphia Road, where Stonequest is, and then we bought the property here.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chairman, that's not aluminum manufacturing. Alcoa is aluminum manufacturing.
No, I agree.
You just used the wrong.
I think, yeah, I don't think it's aluminum manufacturing.
Yeah,
so.
it's all small stuff,
Thank you.
Gary, no, we haven't discussed it. Please describe for the board what uses there are on the surrounding properties.
Well, you have Vic Gerard Golf Carts is next to us in the back. Across the street is an abandoned garage. You have a bird feed next to that. You have a storage placed on the other side of the ice rink. There's the ice rink there with the building in the back. I think it's baseball back there or whatever. Behind me is Steve Green, the trailer place. Jonathan Green is on the other side of me, on the south side of me in the back.
And Squonkle Firehouse is to the one side.
Welcome Firehouse is right there next to us.
Now let's refer to Lot 6, which is where the quote residence, close quote, is located.
Uh-huh.
All right. Now describe that property for the board, if you will.
It's a 100 by 300 foot property with basically an abandoned house on it. I don't think they have any setbacks because it's only 100 foot wide, so he's had that up for sale forever. And he advertises his SED to trying to get somebody to buy and make an office in there is basically what he's trying to do.
No tenants.
There's nobody in that, no. It hasn't been for as long as I know.
All right, and I'll present some testimony later on with some photographs as to what that actually looks like.
Could you please describe what's on lot 8.02?
802 is a house, and he's got a new building that he just put up, and there's, I think, about 50 antique cars inside it.
Okay, is it,
Some are great shape, some are old, some are, I think he's got a new Lamborghini in there. It's very nice, clean stuff.
and the house is occupied?
And the house is occupied, I think he has his office there, he's a CPA.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, my next witness would be Mr. McLaughlin, Dennis McLaughlin.
Thank you.
Well, there's some drivers of photographs that we gave you. Dennis, let's get you sworn.
Yeah, you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Dennis McLaughlin, McLaughlin.
And what's your relationship to the applicant, Mr. McLaughlin?
I've been retained by Smith Properties as a construction consultant. I'll be doing the site construction.
With reference to adjoining Lot 6 that you just heard Mr. Smith describe, do you have an opportunity to take some photographs of that property?
Yes, I have.
Can you get them up for?
All right, let's just mark these in.
I have a thumb drive, I have physicals. I have
So we
both.
have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll mark these A15,
16, did you say, Ron?
A15, A16, A17, A18, and A19.
Okay.
Yeah, and just, each one just call a color photo. And when were the pictures taken?
The pictures were taken, I can say right off of this, they were taken November 10th, 2019.
So, November 10th.
When is the last time you saw the property that's shown in the photos?
About 2 hours ago.
Been any changes since
No.
November 2019?
No.
Okay.
Now, these are the pictures I took 2010, I'm sorry, October this year. I have other pictures that are earlier, when I first got involved with the project back in 2018.
Well, we're just concerned about the pictures that are entered into evidence.
Let's start with this photograph. I don't know what number it is, Ron.
A15.
A15. Does the photo, all of the photos that are going to be shown to you, I'm just going to ask you to comment and to tell the board whether or not they accurately show what exists on the site today.
Existing conditions today. Existing conditions today. Existing sign,
Please note that it says Zone SED.
again, existing.
There's one shot at the
Should be
front.
one
There
more,
should be.
yeah.
It's been like that forever.
That's also existing. You can tell there's two signs. One in the front is Century 21, the other in the back is the commercial sign.
All right. And what condition is the house in based on your observations?
House is non-livable. Looks like it has mildew coming through the stucco walls, and it has been abandoned for a while.
For as long as you've been involved with the project, has anyone ever resided there, to your knowledge?
No.
That's all I have with Mr. McLaughlin.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to recall Jason Fichter, please.
Okay.
Okay, you remain under oath.
Jason, you've heard the testimony of the other witnesses, and I would ask you now, in your capacity as a licensed professional planner, to comment on the aspects of this application that involve variances or waivers.
Sure, so just relying on the, relying on the review letters that we got and building upon the testimony that we gave earlier about what we can comply with and design waivers and such. Apologize. What we're left with are 5 variances that we have to address. All right, I think I got it. So let's see, even though we're not in a residential zone, there's 2 properties assessed as residential that are adjacent to us, and you discussed them just a few minutes ago. They are Lot 8.02, which is to our north, and Lot 5 and 6, which is to our south. And again, 5 and 6 are under common ownership. It's as if it's one lot. And coincidentally, as you just discussed, that Lot 5-6 is listed for sale. It's being marketed as a commercial lot. I've also seen the building out there, and it's in very rough shape. I can't imagine it's salvageable, but that's how it's being marketed. Lot 8.02 has an existing home, which is about 150 feet off our property line. And unfortunately, the aerial photos haven't been updated to reflect it, but as Mr. McLaughlin said, or Gary said, one of the two, there was a building recently constructed. It's about 190 feet long, and it's right along our common property line. So it provides a pretty significant buffer between our project and the home on Lot 8.02.
Do you know what the use of that building is?
I heard collectible cars, yeah.
Was it a garage?
It looks like a big, long barn, but I guess you could call it a garage. Yep. The 2 lots assessed as residential, the one to our north, one to our south, they really don't have the appearance of true residential uses. Again, the building to our south is vacant and for sale, being marketed as commercial, and the property to our north contains a very large accessory building, which makes the lot appear a bit like a commercial use. Since the applicant's lot is very long and narrow, with the narrow dimension being between those 2 adjacent residential uses, and due to the environmental constraints in the rear yard, which again eliminates about 22% of the applicant's lot from development, we're faced with a real challenge to reasonably develop the property to an appropriate level of utilization, and this presents a bit of a hardship situation. But even looking at the variances under the C2 criteria, the flexible criteria, I believe relief is well justified. So this stretch of road is predominantly commercial and industrial, and we also have to keep in mind, again, the purpose of the SED zone, which is to provide development opportunities where highway infrastructure is readily available, which is what we have. This lot goes to the heart of that purpose, since we're only about 1,300 feet from the entrance to Route 195, if you were to go west anyway. And the property is, the applicant's property is located on a county road and has direct connection to 195 along that county road. The residential lots in question are also in the SED zone, where residential is not a permitted use. This means that they're most likely leftovers from prior zoning. I don't believe it would be good planning practice to develop the zone around these two small lots. I think the better alternative would be to develop each lot to its maximum potential and provide visual screening to the legacy residences in the neighborhood. So with that being said, I'll briefly go through each variance. So, and again, these are coming out of your planner's review letter and building upon testimony from earlier, weeding out things that we're saying we can comply with. So fences in front yards must be at least 50% open, and we're proposing a board-on-board fence along the south property line where the arborvitae are, and yes, we'll swap that species out, but just to identify the location. And the goal there is to buffer that residential use. And I say residential use, we heard that the building is vacant. When I say residential, I'm talking about what shows up on the tax records, and understanding that when this property is sold, or sooner or later, it might not be residential anymore. Perimeter buffer of 50 feet is required where adjacent to a residential use. So this is adjacent to lot 8.02 and lot 5 and 6. So that's the north side of our property and south side, but not for the full depth of our lot. Parking, loading, and drive aisles aren't permitted in these areas. And from the north property line, our parking spaces are 6 feet off the property line. And on the south property line, the drive aisle is 15 feet off the property line. Then buffers must contain a 50-foot four-season buffer containing 2 out of 4 options. And your ordinance lists 4 options, and you're supposed to choose 2. We don't have the space for that 50-foot buffer. That between the environmental area in the back and 50 feet on a narrow lot that's 10 acres, it would be, I don't know if you want to call it underutilized, very odd, maybe unusable. How do you circulate trucks and put a building in there? You wouldn't be left with much. Buffer plant material shall be evergreens. We're proposing some red maple. If you prefer them be evergreens, I'm sure we could swap those out. But there was a comment in one of the review letters looking to alternate, the north property line have a species, the south property line have a species, have some street trees out front that's a different species. We're happy to comply with that, whatever the direction is. So in terms of those variances, I took a look at the purposes of planning to see if at least one of those purposes is advanced if this application was to be approved. I think a few are advanced. The first one is, I believe it's an appropriate use and development which promotes the general welfare. So most importantly, we're proposing a permitted use, and we're achieving the purpose of the SED zone. We're staying away from the environmentally sensitive areas. We're providing visual screens to the adjacent residential uses. And we designed the site to reasonably maximize its potential, and the only variances that we're seeking, by and large, is related to the buffer, which we've attempted to mitigate, hopefully to your satisfaction. So I believe this application advances the general welfare. We're securing safety from fire, flood, panic, and other natural man-made disasters. Well, the stormwater management system meets your code as well as the DEP's. It's a very stringent code, and this project meets that. There were some comments in the review letter. Again, we're happy to comply with those. The new buildings will be constructed to the most current safety codes, and I think that the neighbors and the public will benefit from this purpose of planning. We're providing adequate light, air, and open space. Proposed development meets all setbacks and building heights, so I think we've achieved that one. We're providing sufficient space in an appropriate location for commercial and industrial use. And I think this is the most significant consideration with this application. So this project is proposed, is being proposed. It's in an exceptionally appropriate location due to its proximity to Route 195 and its frontage and connection along a county road. The SED zone was created for this very purpose, to encourage development where highway infrastructure is readily available, and that's exactly what we have. Underutilization of the property would not be taking advantage of this terrific location for this proposed use. Another purpose is to encourage location and design of transportation routes which will promote the free flow of traffic. Again, for the same reasons, not to repeat them, but this is another purpose that aligns perfectly with the reason that the SED zone was created, for the close proximity to highway access. We're promoting a desirable visual environment. The site was designed to be aesthetically appealing, especially as viewed from the road. Again, most of the development is going to be way back. It's not going to be visible. Nevertheless, we attempted to design the whole site to be attractive. We gave a special focus along the frontage to make that look nice to the people that are driving up and down the road. And, of course, to provide some attractive visual screens for our residential neighbors. And lastly, I believe that we would be conserving property values in the neighborhood. So we believe that this project is going to be in high demand, and we believe that because in my discussions with the applicant over the past year or two, he's been fielding great interest from various users. And by the way, just a footnote on that, you heard some testimony from Mr. Smith about a user and him using the building. And when I got up here initially and I talked about not knowing who the users are, I was aware of that information, but I could tell you that between the start of the project and now, it changes a lot. I think we're probably honing in a little bit on what it's actually going to be, but I didn't want to commit to anything, so that's why I'm leaving it open. So the negative criteria. So focusing on the relief that's required, the proposed use is permitted. Development of the property is already limited due to the environmental areas in the rear yard. The property itself is very narrow relative to its size at 10 acres. We're providing visual screens for our residential neighbors. We're very fortunate to be located on a county road and connected very nearby to Route 195. It's a great complement to the proposed use. It's exactly what the SED was created to do. So I think we achieved that purpose of the ordinance. One of the objectives of the master plan is to encourage the redevelopment or revitalization of vacant or unutilized properties. I think this project achieves that objective as well because it's 10 acres with significant upland area. In other words, in its current condition, it's vacant and underutilized. So with all these things considered, I think that if this application was approved, it would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good, nor would it substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan. Now, as you consider the negative criteria, I like to highlight the word substantial. You're not just looking to see if approving the application would cause a detriment to the public or an impairment to the zone plan. You're looking to see if it would cause a substantial detriment or a substantial impairment. And I don't believe this application rises to the level of substantial in either case. And then on balance, I believe that the benefits of this application would substantially outweigh its detriments, giving you the ability to approve this application with confidence.
Jason, I'd like to go back to a question that was raised with our traffic engineer. That's the subject of turning radiuses for trucks coming in and out of the site. You did the design, did you not?
We did.
And are they sufficient for tractors, trailers, box trucks, whatever else might be coming in?
The turning plan shows that it works. I believe that we have the support of the county. We don't have their final approval. We have conditional approval. We don't have final. But we have to revisit that with them just to tidy that up. At this point right now, I would say it works. I think our plan shows that it works. And we just have to make sure that the county is comfortable with how we get it there.
What needs to be,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
what needs to be done to tighten it up? I mean, what needs to be submitted?
I don't know at this point. We've been focusing on this level of approvals. We got our conditional approval from the county. We put it aside. We want to make sure that we're moving forward as designed before we go back to the county to revisit that.
Can you, I don't think we have that preliminary or conditional approval, so between now and the next meeting, can you just
Yes.
submit that?
Can you give me some testimony looking at your design of your ingress and egress? Tractor trailers coming from the northbound into that site. How are they going to turn into the...
So the one you're looking at is southbound. That's on the screen right now. And when you're analyzing a turn into a driveway, that's the controlling.
I'm talking north.
I'm saying that truck is southbound.
Oh, gotcha.
Is that what which one did you mean?
No, go ahead.
You only have it exiting the site?
Well, maybe I can answer it both ways because I'm not sure which way you want to go. I'll answer it both ways. So if a truck is heading southbound, that is, so a right in, that's going to be the controlling movement because you're hugging the curb. We did not analyze a northbound truck making a left in because you're going to have a ton more room to make that move. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
So this truck exiting has to go into opposing traffic? I'm just trying to understand your path here, because this is supposed to be the truck path?
Sorry, no, that truck is coming in.
So this
It-
movement that's going out, where's that truck wheel on your? I guess you said you provided this exhibit and you're comfortable that the trucks can get in and out. I'm looking at this and I'm having a hard time understanding what this truck is supposed to show. If this is it moving in, but you didn't show it in because you felt like you didn't need to, and then coming out, it's unclear which wheel we are here. Is it this one? Are they going onto opposing traffic to get out?
So we are showing that entering the site, and then on the other driveway, we show it exiting the site.
So in order to enter the site, even though the vehicle's facing the wrong way, it has to travel into opposing traffic?
On the site?
Yes. Right here, right?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Not uncommon for
Not,
large
it's
trucks.
not uncommon at a site access drive for the tractor trailer to have to go into opposing lane?
For this type of use, no. If this was a retail site with people coming in and out all day, I'd have more of an issue, and we'd be talking about delivery timing restrictions. But for a site like this, no, I don't see an issue with that.
Well, but just on that issue, whether it's common or not, I think the testimony has to be, is it safe?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. This is not uncommon. It's a common solution. I'm comfortable with it. We're not going to have heavy traffic at that driveway. I don't see a conflict there. We have ample visibility between cars entering and exiting. If it's during sundown, when it's a little darker out, we've designed the site to provide ample light at those driveways, which is a common design solution. So I see no potential for hazard at that point.
If a car is exiting, and that tractor trailer has to come in and go into his lane, no, you gotta be,
So what's going to happen in that point is, depending on where the car is and where the truck is, who gets there first. If you are in a car adjacent to building number 1 and you see a truck coming in, you'll wait 2 seconds for it to finish. If you're a car at the stop line and you're a truck trying to come in, you'll wait 2 seconds and wait for the car to exit before you come in.
So why don't you guys just redesign it and make it the one side entry only and the other side exit only, because the back side is gonna be, that's your tractor trailer side when they're gonna come around to unload, that's all the box trucks, correct?
That is something that the county has been kicking around. They have not mandated it. I don't know that they will, but they have kicked that concept around.
Because the flow would be a lot easier if, if you had one coming in and one coming out, just to alleviate any potential, crossing the line, leaving, okay? Double line when the tractor trailer's coming down, making a left coming from the north.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think that would be a major issue for the flow on our site. If that's something that you would prefer to see, I don't.
It would be a lot easier for emergency vehicles too, God forbid something, happen to flow in there a lot easier.
We have those in the plan as well, but to your point, I understand what you're saying.
So your design on the entrance, on the north entrance there, where that truck is supposedly turning in, why is there a kick out? with the
So
curb
it
line?
shows, what you're looking at there, there's a set of lines that represents the tire marks, and then there's a set of lines that represents the outer swing.
Well,
I
why,
think he's talking about this. You have to,
no, this, I'm talking about, go back down one, go back down. So can you reduce the view? Instead of, previously, why this kick out here? Why not just make this continuing straight and just opening this up more in this area? Why is this kick around like that? Why does that not follow the natural path of the drive out there?
Well, we're trying to come into the road perpendicular, and we're trying to keep the width of the driveway common, and then we provide a nice curb radius to provide space for the vehicles to come in and out. That's the logic behind how that's laid out.
and just so I can understand where you envision the trucks coming from and leaving, so southerly, they're turning right and heading towards, they're leaving your site, you don't show the left turn, so I'm assuming you're gonna have trucks turning right towards, you said
No.
195 is your basis.
restricted movement?
No. So what we're showing there are the most restrictive movements. So if a truck was exiting from the southern driveway, making a left, if it can make the right, it can easily make the left. So we don't show the left.
And you don't show a truck turning in there?
No, but it would work. I could show you if you like. But
And trucks, you said a big reason for this site being ideal is trucks are coming or going to 195?
yes, but I'm not saying that that's the only place they're going to come and go from. But that, I bet you the vast, vast majority of them will. But no, we're not looking to restrict it to that.
Just a question on parking. We heard that you compared a lot of different standards as well as your traffic engineer. And I think you kind of said you thought the board would be in favor of approximately 60 more spaces required than ordinance. I'm still confused. I mean, when you broke down the parking per our ordinance, you did office and warehouse, and you said 112 spaces. I'm not sure what our standard is for manufacturing. I don't think you did that comparison. And you kind of felt like it felt the shopping center use. Your traffic engineer compared it to an industrial park. And that's your rationale to have 60 more parking spaces on the site?
I'm only trying to make you happy. If you're happy with less, we're happy with less. I did all these calculations, and I saw the highest number and figured that's what you'd like.
I'm trying to understand compliance. So we have an ordinance, and you're looking for 60 parking spaces more, not 5, not 10. So I'm trying to understand the intensity of your users. You indicated you don't anticipate a lot of the public coming, which is why you said you're comfortable with site safety at the ingress drive, that there's not going to be passenger vehicles, right?
Agreed.
So why then is there such a need for all this additional parking?
I guess when we were putting this together and I ran those numbers and I came up with 112, I felt that if we came here with 112, I was afraid you'd ask for 174.
So you find that typically this board, as it relates to parking, requests more than what their ordinance requires? I'm just trying to understand where that would come from.
I think you've gotten far off track there. No, I'm not making any accusations whatsoever. I'm just trying to anticipate what the board would like for parking.
Trying to be as conservative as possible, that's all.
Can I just ask a question? So your testimony, when there were questions about the tractor trailers coming in and, using both lanes and whether it was safe or not, I'm going to summarize or paraphrase. You said that you were not concerned because the nature of the uses on site were not such that, there would be a lot of, cars coming in and out. So it wasn't a safety concern. Is that generally what I heard?
That's generally what I was saying, yes.
Okay. But then I also heard before that the intent is that any use that's permitted in the SED zone would be able to go in, right?
Yes.
I mean, one of those uses is just a general office use in the SED zone. So, I mean, if a general office use went in, would that change your assumptions?
Not really, no, because what you would have with general office is you would have a morning slug and an afternoon slug of traffic. In midday, you wouldn't see much in and out. But that's where you might start. I think retail is the most extreme example. Office would not be like retail, where people are, or medical, where people are going in and out all day. In the case of an office, I don't think it would be terrible. But at that point, if you have, let's say one building was filled with office and the rest were manufacturing or warehouse with office and whatever, you might start to impose timing restrictions on large deliveries, which I think is easily achievable with the owner running the property and the tenants having leases.
Well, but that's not going to be a condition that the owner's running the property. I mean, at some point, the owner may want to retire and just, you may have a non-owner that owns the property at some point. Unless that is a condition that you're proposing.
No, not.
Okay, I didn't think so.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, the only reason I bring up the parking and being in excess is they are seeking, and the board hasn't really weighed in, but they're seeking a variance for a 50-foot wide buffer on both sides. The property is about 300 feet in width. Typically, this board looks at their buffer standards pretty tough. And so essentially, when you look at this plan, even up here with the circulation, there's minimal to no buffer provided. So I know that the board has to weigh in on that and how you felt with the testimony, but they are providing 60 extra parking spaces that are required that I'm not sure are necessarily justified considering some of the relief that they're requesting.
But even, Laura, even if those 60 parking lots, say on the north side, were eliminated, that still wouldn't meet the buffer requirement. 'Cause
Well,
those-
they don't have to do the buffer the whole width, but, and they would not make the entire, but I think there has to be some clarification between the two. I mean, to just provide them and do little to no effort to meet our buffer.
So reducing some of those parking spots on the north end and possibly landscaping them to provide more trees, almost like an island?
I'm not even saying an island, this is,
Extending.
How many spaces are there, Jay, in that run?
Extending this curb line to make this all plantings in here?
I think you go longer, 60 extra spaces. So you're probably getting to at least the dumpster, probably beyond that. How many spaces are in that row?
Right, well, I just did the math. It looks like there's 71 interior spaces, not counting that entire north line. So I'm not sure what the number is we
There's-
actually require.
If you look, there's 31 to the refuse area.
Yeah.
And again, I know the board hasn't weighed in on that. The testimony was, I know to the south was that the property's for sale, but that this is a residential use, maybe we wait for public. I just bring it up because it is 60 extra spaces, it's not like 5. And given their testimony, I know we've been a little unclear as to the use, but it doesn't appear to be, well, we don't really know what the use could be as to how much public would be on site.
I still think it would be beneficial to have parking spots in front of that first warehouse, but maybe somewhere right where the arrow is right now with the plus sign, somewhere right in there towards the refuge container.
Food for thought, as you're kicking this around, and we're all ears. We could bank spaces. I mean, that still means that they may be there at some point in the future, but maybe they're not, and we can bank them and
Leave them green.
put some landscape in there. So just food for thought.
Can you scroll down to the back of the unit? Can you come out?
Where you want me to
Go in a little bit more.
Where?
This area right here. So, these extra spots here, doesn't that interrupt the whole flow of all traffic movement right in here? I just don't see a purpose for this bumping out in here.
No, so there's a 30-foot access aisle beyond that, and that was our design control. So we provided parking beyond that. And then when it juts out a little bit like that, we've effectively separated the two buildings for whatever that's worth.
I think what we do.
So that building's existing.
Right, yeah, I meant,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then same thing there. If you look on the right side behind the flag there you go. Same thing, 30-foot drive
Also
aisle.
eliminating this, bring the curb line out to the street here, that way you have a bigger drive aisle in here.
I think, I don't know off the top of my head, maybe you do, Laura. Do you have a restriction on driveway width in terms of a max? I think there
I
might
believe
be.
we just dealt with this
yeah, I think we
opening.
do.
I think it
that
was
might
like 30
reduce
feet.
some of the concerns about trucks getting in and out.
But I say that, but we can do whatever with that, if that would make you more comfortable.
We're just going back and forth from the previous testimony when we started the night, that we didn't know who was going to be in there, who potentially is going in. Then Mr. Smith came up and said he's going to be taking the entire back building. So I don't know how many employees Mr. Smith has and how much manufacturing he does of the glass. So we need to, he knows how many employees he has, how many spots he's going to need for his trucks, okay? And then the 30,000 for the aluminum, potential aluminum tenant, he could give Mr. Smith approximate 10, 15 employees, including the office space. My concern is just the flow of the tractor trailers or box trucks, because that's not that question too, we can't get a straight answer on. We're gonna have more box trucks, we're gonna have, some tractor trailers, so that's fine, okay? With the 30-foot drive, which I'm satisfied with the 30-foot drive. But as Chief, Mr. Kudrick said, I am concerned with coming around And I'm more concerned with the parking spaces up front. If the trucks are gonna come in and everything's unloaded in the back on the northbound side, correct?
Correct, southbound.
Southbound side.
Yes.
Then all the flow of those trucks come in, loop around, back in as box trucks, because that's what they're gonna do, okay? They're not gonna stay in the lanes, and the tractor trailers are gonna come in. So to protect the pedestrians, these potential pedestrians that we're saying are gonna be there, if we have, you know, just the front building's 42.5, and we're gonna, say we split that up into 5,000 to max it out, so the Smith family could, you know, get as much revenue out of this place as possible, okay? These 60 extra spots, you know, are they gonna be needed or are they not gonna be needed? Because we're already taking away the 42.5 in the back, and you're taking away the 30,000 out of the 42, you know, out of the 42 in the center, right?
John, let me just help. The chief makes a valid point that we should probably bank them.
Yeah,
Thank you.
agreed.
You're also gonna help the tenants, so that's not an issue. I think we're all probably banking those spots. It makes all the sense in the world. My only concern left is the ingress and egress, and I'm gonna propose that our professional looks at it, if we could have our traffic engineer look at this. I'm not seeing enough from that one truck and even what the chief is saying with the bump out, that this is really gonna work safely. I think it just needs another set of eyes.
If it makes you feel more comfortable, I don't see an issue for the applicant's operations to make a one-way in, one-way out. And that'll provide a ton more space for the truck to make the move. I would suggest that we have two-way internal circulation, but once you get to those isolated driveways, it would be one in, one out, which is the same way the ice rink is.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, that's all things that can be discussed with the board's traffic professional when he's taking a look at it.
Right.
Yeah, I would appreciate
Yeah.
Mr. Fisher, can I ask you a question? So now I'm looking at a different tractor-trailer exhibit, I think. And previously, when you had your trucks making a right, there was no blocking into oncoming traffic to make the right out. And this exhibit appears to show a vehicle, I think, going into the right lane to make that, or are they turning in?
So if you look at the label there, you got the WB67. The other one you were looking at, I think that might have been the fire truck. We have a few different trucks here. We have, where were you? So that bottom one, that should be the SU-30, the box truck. The one up top is the tractor trailer, the WB67. That's the monster, the big humongous one. So that works. And then there should be another sheet showing refuse.
Well, whatever it is, I mean, that is what our traffic engineer will take a look at, and you can coordinate with him.
No, that's,
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
But just to Mr. Cucchiero's point, when I was asking you before, you didn't clarify that, so I was on the exhibit showing the emergency, and now we're on this one, so I just want the board to see this showing the movements, just as was just indicated by our board member their concern.
Mr. Chair? I also have a concern. Is there any intention of any ability for anyone that rents a space so that they can sell items within the flex space?
there is actually, your ordinance has, it's got a little twist to it. If it's retail associated with.
I'm
what's
aware of the
there-
formula, but what I'm asking is is that the intent of the application?
Well, no, because we don't know what we're saying is that a permitted use would go into these buildings. That's the nature of the flex.
So you would want this application to go through open-ended, that provision would be available to you, or to the owner?
The limitation on the retail, which I think is what you're talking about, is 1,000 square feet. That's the max
Yes.
allowed. So
Yes, it is.
that's kind of de minimis in the grand scheme of things here. But what we anticipate, and the various tenants, potential tenants that Mr. Smith has spoken to, are all in the warehousing, contractor, manufacturer, which to me, they're all generally the same thing. So that's what we're looking at. Maybe 1,000 foot of retail will go in there, but we haven't heard from any potential tenants about that.
I don't know if that would make me look differently at the traffic. That's my concern.
So I just, usually though, when an application comes in, it's for a particular use on the property. And, variance relief is related to that. The parking concerns are related to that, the ingress and egress. And, I'm looking at your notice, but I'm hearing you tonight. You're asking for approval of office, financial institutions, healthcare facilities, warehouse, assembly and packaging, utility uses, agriculture, manufacturing, manufacturing textile, manufacturing lumber, manufacturing furniture, manufacturing paper, manufacturing printing and publishing, manufacturing leather, there's a few other manufacturing, construction, multi-purpose recreational, solar energy, microbrewery, and a health club?
Correct.
That's what you're asking for tonight?
We're not asking for approval for any specific use.
You said you're asking for approval for every use.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's permitted in the zone, and assuming a building can accommodate it, because I don't think we're going to get any banks in any of these buildings.
But what I'm saying though is, like, multi-purpose recreational seems to be a lot different from what you were testifying to tonight, in a lot of areas. So I think you may want to consider honing it in a little bit, is what I'm saying, between now and the next meeting.
Well, I guess that's the nature of flex, where it's flexible. It could be different
That's
things.
not what you said. You said,
It is what I
first of all,
said.
flex is not defined in our ordinance. When you said flex, you said a combination of office and warehouse. You didn't talk about a microbrewery.
I did not rattle off the list of permitted uses that are in the ordinance, but that is.
5 minutes,
Sure.
literally 5 minutes.
Sure. Taking a break for 5 minutes. Planning board's now reconvened.
What I went over with my client is the list that Ron just read. And yes, ideally, we'd like to be able to do anything in these buildings that the SED zone permits. But on the other hand, my client understands that, as Ron said, it has to be compressed a little bit, and that's fine with us. You mentioned breweries. We're perfectly happy to accept the condition that there won't be.
Well, I think you're coming back anyway. So I think maybe, between now and next time, we can
Refine the list.
refine the list. And if you want to talk about it, engineer, attorney to attorney, or all of us together, we can do that. I don't want to press you
I understand.
to have to do it tonight. But it impacts things such as the parking. It impacts the traffic analysis. So for instance, and I know you said no microbreweries, but let's just take, if it could be any permitted use and we get a health club, a medical facility, an office, and a microbrewery, and then one manufacturing, it kind of changes, the testimony we've heard tonight on a few things. So I think between now and next meeting, let's, we can all work together to come to a common ground on it.
Okay. The other question I wanted to ask Jay before he leaves is Laura mentioned the subject of tree removal. I do want to revisit that. The ordinance does require that in order to get the benefit, if you will, of making the contribution in lieu of planting trees, you have to show that there are practical difficulties that prevent us from replanting. Describe for the board what those practical difficulties would be.
So the practical difficulties with putting in more trees is the same as I discussed for other reasons. We have 10 acres, but we're very narrow. We've got a couple residences on either side we have to think about. We have 22% of the property in the back that's gone, that's untouched. And we're trying to make reasonable utilization of the property. So it kind of limits how many trees we could put in. We did manage to put in a ton. It's going to fall short of what your ordinance would require. So we did provide a calculation on the plan as to the contribution that would have to be made. But I recognize that we need your nod on that, or relief from you, to be able to make a contribution in lieu of. So that's the logic behind why we're seeking that. There was also, Ms. Spiro had some comments in her letter about adding some trees here, switching some species there, and that's all going to go to that same purpose, and we're happy to discuss with her and follow her guidance on that.
Council. Ron or Laura, I'm just looking at the dates here. Are they applicable to the new sidewalk ordinance?
I believe they were filed prior to.
Okay.
But typically what we've done is asked applicants, they could say no, but we have
Sure.
asked applicants if we granted the waiver, whether they would make the contribution.
Okay.
We'll discuss that as well.
Okay. Are there any final questions tonight?
Now, I'd just like to clarify for the record, the items that the board is going to ask us to address. Number one is visiting the subject of the uses that we are asking your approval to develop. The tree waiver, he just gave testimony on. Landscaping, we're going to do some revisions there regarding the arborvitae, as was noted. Trash, recognizing that the applicant is proposing to take the back 45,000 square feet. Do you want us to revisit that subject? Mr. DeCastro raised the question, and we can, long story short, we can expand the area at the rear of the property to include more dumpster facilities, if you will.
I'm not expecting you to give me an answer tonight. I think that is, in all fairness, you're coming back, let's see what you come up with, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, okay, all right. And we're proposing banking the parking spaces on the north side of the site for the time being. And we're going to take a look at with your traffic engineer, the circulation plan, how trucks and cars come in and come out.
Peter, you have something?
Yeah, just real quick, with regard to banking the parking for the, that linear area that I imagine you're going to show that on a revised plan. If there's an opportunity to install a fence or anything else that would enhance the visual screening on that side, that'd be something I'd be interested in seeing.
Hey, Frank, I think if there was one more, the architectural plans will be submitted for them
Yes.
to.
Yeah, have to be reviewed by the planner and by.
As well as the traffic,
Conditional
wasn't a
statement.
report, but it was a
Statement,
statement.
traffic statement. County approval.
Right, yeah.
I thought that the board was copied on that way back when, but it might not have been.
Our engineer doesn't have it, so just,
Okay.
I think easier, just resubmit them.
Just to clarify, the fence that you were talking about for the buffer, that's related to the adjacent residential uses, correct? Yeah. I think, I'll double check this because we're coming back, but I'm pretty sure that's in there. There is fence in there. If there isn't, we'll add it.
If I may.
Sure.
I don't want to make your bid, how much time you're going to need to do all this stuff.
Laura, Sherry, do you guys have anything?
I have nothing
Okay.
further.
So we have to skip one month.
I
No,
was
we got to come in 10 days. Maybe third.
So I guess, Eileen, what are we looking for date-wise for these guys?
How much time do you think you need? I have March 5th with a minor subdivision on it, and that's all that's on that night. March 19th has 3 applications on, so I don't think you're going there. After that, you're looking at April 2nd.
And it's 10 days prior, right? Submit.
Revised plans 10 days prior?
Yeah.
Well, we typically like that. Our bylaws don't require that, but, if you want to show up and have had our, professionals have had an opportunity to look at whatever you want to be submitting, it would be prudent.
What do you think? No, I know you can't. And you say the 19th is booked pretty much, Eileen?
That has 3 applications on,
All right, so that puts us, what, the first meeting in April?
April 2nd.
Yeah.
April 2nd?
Yeah, looks like it.
Okay.
And I'll need an extension of time if you want to put it on the record?
Sure.
To the end of April?
Yes, for the record, requested extension of time for the board to act is granted until the end of April, April 30th.
Thank you so much.
All right, so then the application of Smith Family Properties LLC, case number SP-1041A, will be carried to the board's April 2nd, 2020 meeting, beginning 7 o'clock here in the main meeting room at Town Hall. There'll be no further notice to property owners.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Is there a master plan status report for anybody that sits on that committee?
I don't think there's been a committee established yet.
Oh, gotcha.
And I have had a question from someone wanting to know if we are having our meeting, which is scheduled for next week. And I guess since there's no committee, there's no meeting.
Yeah,
I think they're
Brian's
still
not here.
working on budget issues
Understood.
so that the committee, when it is formed, can actually understand what it could be productively working towards.
Understood.
So I'll put a notice up to cancel that, all right?
Okay. And Ron, is there any reason to go into executive session?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Nick, if I may?
Oh, sure.
I just wanna
Mr.
put this-
Seaman?
I just want to put this on the record, because I've been thinking about it, and, the SED zone, it is inherently vague by definition, right? But the whole concept for us, especially bringing in business, is highest and best use. I, for one, I would have no personal opposition to a fitness center.
Well,
or a
that's,
microbrewery.
Right.
we've already,
Discussed.
I'm just saying, provided that,
it's has to do with that application, which we've closed out, so we really can't discuss that right now.
that's what I figured.
Motion to adjourn? Good job. All right.
Go home.
We almost fucked that up.